I'm going to try to do a quick video while my family is preoccupied. Taylor went to the mall with a friend a few minutes ago, so she'll be gone for a while. And Jason's in the other room watching Sling Blade. And I told him that I'm filming and asked him not to make any weird Sling Blade sounds while I'm filming. But knowing him, he's going to forget about that and do it anyway, so I just apologize for whatever bizarre Sling Blade imitations you might hear in the background. They're kind of funny, but a little creepy. So anyway, I said I wasn't going to do a video on paper beads, and I didn't intend to, but I got so many requests and questions about them that I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and do one. I'm not going to really do a how-to because Jenny Belly just did a very thorough how-to video on paper beads. So if you need a how-to, go on over to her channel and she'll show you exactly how to roll them up and make different shapes and all that. I'm not really going to show you that. I'm probably going to show some footage that I filmed of me rolling beads last night while I was watching TV with Jason. But it will be, you know, silent footage, or I'll do a voiceover or something, because there's nothing new to show there. I don't do anything any different than anyone else. These are what I've made over the past few days. It's like less than a week. I've been a little obsessive about it, and I outgrew my lovely little plastic container that I had the beads in, which made me really sad because I loved the way they sounded when I shook the box. And this is okay, but it's not the same. So yeah, I'm looking for another container. I usually find really good containers online at American Science and Surplus. I just usually get all my little storage containers there because they're so cheap and awesome and bizarre. So anyway, these are my beads, and I'll have some close-up pictures at the end so that you can see what they look like. But I have made them out of a variety of papers. There's some scrapbook paper, there is some dictionary pages, there's some painted papers, and some drop papers, which I have discovered are my favorites. These are just my, you know, drop paper, blotter papers that I use when I paint. I think those are my favorite of all. Text weight, cardstock weight, you know, you name it. Some I have embellished. There's some that have got, you know, fancy little doodahs on them. Excuse me. Some are glittered. Some are, I have some really cool little skinny metallic tape I used on that. And then I've got some, you know, gold leafy stuff. And some of them I just wrapped with some metallic, well, if I can get it out, metallic thread. So anyway, I've got pictures of these at the end that I'll show you so that you can see. I'll show you what I use. My supplies, hang on. My supplies that I use are probably not any different from anybody else's, really. You need something to roll the beads on. Sometimes I use toothpicks. These are just a little container of my dirty, icky craft toothpicks. But most of the time I use a pokey tool like this, you know, with the really long pokey part. And I like it better than the toothpick because it's a little bit smaller around, so it makes the hole of the bead a little bit smaller. This makes a big hole, you know, this one not quite so much. And I prefer this size. So I try to roll them on here when I can. I found one of those bead tools on Etsy. I found one that I liked. It was just a simple wooden one that a girl makes, and she sells them for like $5. And she sells her own paper beads too on her Etsy site, and her beads are really good. So I figure she probably uses her own tool to make those beads, so for $5, that's probably a good bargain. I'm going to get me one of those $5 bead rolly tool things. Of course, I don't know why I would need it now that I have made 10 million beads. It's kind of pointless, but I just feel that I need to have it for the future, just in case. So anyway, you need something to roll them on, a pokey tool or a toothpick, or if you live in the UK, I guess these are cocktail sticks. Cocktail sticks? Is that right? Oh wait, that was more Australian. Well, whatever. Anyway, I'm not good with accents, but you know what I mean. You need your paper strips, and you can see, I'll show you some footage of when I was rolling beads, what my strips look like, and they're crazy. They're not perfect. Jenny Belly shows you a really easy way to cut them with your little, you know, paper cutter. I don't even measure, I just cut, and then I examine the strip and then determine which type of bead it might be best suited for. And I only make a couple different shapes because a lot of the shapes really irritate me. That saucer bead where you make with the long skinny strip, okay, that hurts my hands. My hands start cramping up. I've got parts missing in one wrist, and it gets a little painful to do really tedious things with my fingers where I have to hold tight. And I did find, after I started making these, my hands were cramping up like crazy. And I discovered it's because I was holding everything so tight. And when I made a conscious effort to just loosen up, it was much easier on my hands. So if you're thinking, ew, I can't make paper beads because I have hand issues and it hurts, well, just try doing it and consciously loosening up and see if that helps at all. It may not, depending on your issue, but it did help me quite a bit. So you need something to roll them on. You need your paper. I already talked about that, right? You need some glue to hold the end of the bead together. And I use, if it's a real thin paper, sometimes I'll just grab this, you can see, well-used bottle of Elmer's Craft Bond. It's just a gel glue. It's kind of like just a gel version of Elmer's, which is not good for much of anything except for gluing together thin pieces of paper. You know, like if you're using a dictionary page or something like this. I would probably grab this Elmer's stuff. For everything else, heavy papers and cardstocks, you can use like Aleene's tacky glue, or this is what I use instead of Aleene's. I like it better. I find it stickier. It's Crafter's Pick. It's called the Ultimate, and it calls itself a non-toxic water-based super glue. I don't know that I would go that far, but it is a fabulously sticky white glue. And I keep it stored either upside down or on its side because it's thick like tacky glue, and I can't hardly shake it down. If I store it like this, I have problems. So I just keep it usually on its side or upside down. Because that glue is so sticky, it ends up getting all over my fingers, which gets all over my beads. I have found that, you remember this the rubber thing that you use to get sticky off of your cardstock? I talked about this a few videos ago. You can get these at the craft store. Works great for getting sticky glue off your fingers. You know, it will ball up and fall off and make a mess, but that's easy to brush away, and it keeps you from getting, you know what I'm talking about, the dirty glue blobs that you get on your fingers. Yeah, those will stick to your beads if you don't get them off. So I keep that on hand. Usually when I put the glue on the bead, sometimes I'll lay them out like on this is freezer paper, I'll lay them out on some freezer paper or wax paper, you know, just toss them out and let them dry, or sometimes I'll go ahead and stick them on a toothpick and get them ready to seal. And this is my holder for that. This is a cardboard case that my water bottles come in. And I have a whole bunch of these I keep on hand, and I just use them for storing, you know, like a project in them, or toting stuff from upstairs to downstairs. And I've painted some of them because I had used them at one time in my, I'd used some of them in my craft booth. But I've got a whole bunch of them, and several of them I have just tons of holes poked in the bottom. I just used my pokey tool and took out some frustrations on it. It was actually, I have way more holes than I need because the act of stabbing the holes in there was very therapeutic. So yeah, this is a twofer. This served all kinds of purposes. But I poke the holes, and then, you know, when I'm making the beads and I get them all glued and ready to seal, I will just put them on a toothpick and then just stick them in there. So I can get a whole bunch of beads on there. But then when I'm not doing beads, this also serves other purposes. You know, and I'm all about that. I don't like those one-trick horse things, you know. I like my stuff to serve multiple purposes. So that's what I use for drying beads or anything else I need to impale on a toothpick. Let's see. To seal the beads when I'm finished, okay, you can use all kinds of stuff. You can use that dimensional glaze stuff or glossy accents, or sometimes I'll use something like just a varnish. This is a craft varnish, or you can even use a good, you know, like Liquitex makes a varnish that I use sometimes. You can use that. You can use, I have used up several bottles of old nail polish, which has been really great. I had several. Some are base coat, some are top coat, don't care as long as they're clear. Some were glossy, some even had a matte finish, didn't care, just wanted to get my beads sealed up. And so nail polish was really great. And then I even experimented with using some colors. I had some glitter nail polish that I used on some that was just awesome. It turned out really cool. I'll try to show some of those at the end. And then I also used just some frosty, transparent nail polish on some of them. And so it works fine. You know, I'm going to use my beads in paper projects, not as jewelry. I don't care for paper bead as jewelry. If I was going to use them for jewelry, I would definitely coat them with a resin. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, well, why don't I coat them with a resin anyway? Because I love the hard, glossy finish that a resin gives you. So I'm going to show you. We're going to do that. I'm going to show you how to resin your beads if you want to. But before we do that, embellishing, I didn't embellish a whole lot of my beads because I used decorative papers, and I liked the way the papers turned out. I like the way they look without any other embellishments. But a few of them I did, just the plain ones or ones that I just wanted to play with. And some of the things I used, I skipped a step. All of my beads on the ends of them, and sometimes I'll do this before I seal them, sometimes I do it after, it doesn't really matter. But on the ends of every single bead, I stick a marker in it. And I usually just pick a marker that's kind of close to the color of the bead, stick it in the hole, and go rah, 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 and stick it in this one, and go rah, rah, rah. And you have to make that sound, rah, 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 or it doesn't work right. So I do that. Because to me, they're not finished if you can see the white inside. It just looks unfinished. It's like the edges of a card. You know, one of my art mentors from years ago taught me that your card, this is when we were rubber stamping, your card is not finished unless your back is done and your edges are done. And I have remembered that, and I've carried it through with everything I do. I finish my back, I finish my edges, even if it's just to cover them neatly with something plain. That's just what I do. It looks more finished. So I stick a marker in the holes, and then you can use those markers. I think I have some footage of me just on some of my strips of paper using those markers to just kind of color in some plain strips. And then even after they're rolled, you can use the markers as well. I also used, this is the gold leaf that I used, and it's just this little box I have of scraps of metallic leafing, gold, silver, copper. You know, some of it was that decorative kind with a pattern, and you know, you always get, they come in the big sheets, but then you always end up with little scraps after you've, you know, you stick it on something and then you brush off the dust. I brush my dust into here, and then I reuse my dust because it's still usable. And then some of them are just big pieces that were all stuck together and irritated me, so I shoved them in here. But I just put some leaf-in glue on some of the beads and then rolled them around in there, dusted them off, and got some really cool looking leafed, is that right? Leafed beads? Leaved beads? Leafed. Gilded. Gilt? Shoot. See, this is too complicated already. I also used, you can use glitter. I put some glitter glue on some of them. And then I got out some of my old, and I meant to look these up before I talked about them and I forgot. This is a product called Rocks from Judikins. Excuse me. It's a copper colored little bits of I don't know what. They're kind of hard, metallic-y, just, you know, rocks. So I put some of those on the beads, and excuse me, I put some, okay, these are Suze Weinberg's Bedazzles, and I've probably got a dozen of these in different colors, and they're just a mixture of tiny, 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 tiny holeless beads, and then little bitty pieces of metallic bits, little like confettis, or I don't even know what you would call that. But I don't even know. I've probably had these at least 15 years. I'm not sure. And I don't know if Suze still sells these. I know she used to work a lot with Ranger. I don't know if they're a Ranger product, if it's something in her own line. I can't remember. That's how long I've had them. But you can look, if you want these, you can, I'm sure if you Google Suze Weinberg Bedazzles or something like that, you'll find them. Because they're a great little, I don't use them much anymore. I used them more when I was doing more, rubber stamping type stuff. But I just sort of rediscovered them in my drawer the other day and thought, I really should use those. Those were fun. So I used them on some of the beads, and I liked them. And you just, put glue on the bead and stick it in the little jar, and the stuff sticks to it. And one thing I've been using that I really like is this skinny metallic tape that I've also had for 150 years. And I don't know where I got this. I could have bought it at, some kind of art supply or craft store. It could have been from back during the time where I used to buy a lot of pin strapping at the auto parts store, because when we first started using this decorative metallic tape like this, years ago, it was kind of pricey, and when it first came out, not everyone had it. But I discovered that if you go to AutoZone, they got all kinds of metallic tapes that you can play with, and they were usually more expensive. The package itself was more expensive, but it was because you got a whole lot more for your money. So in the long run, it was cheaper. So I used to buy a lot of pin strapping to use on my rubber stamp cards and stuff. This may be left over from that, or it might have been a craft product. I really don't know. But it's super, super skinny. I'd say maybe 1/8 of an inch wide, probably. And which is just perfect for the beads, because they're small. And I've been using it on some of my beads that I wasn't real crazy about. Like this poor little tube bead, it really wasn't tapered at all on the ends. And it just ended up looking like a brown piece of awfulness. I just really hated it. So I used some of that metallic tape. I just put little strips this way and around the ends, and now I just love that bead. That's awesome. And this was another plain tube bead that needed help, and then I just ran the tape around in a little spiral design, and now I love that bead. And it's also good to just put little accents on the ends of the tube beads like that. So there's just some ideas. So we covered our supplies, our decorating, our sealing. So what now? You want to play with resin? Let's play with resin. I'm going to use ice resin, and if the ice resin people happen to see this video, they're probably going to cringe and scream, "Oh my God, no, no, she's doing it wrong, she's doing it wrong." I can just picture it. But let me tell you, I use a lot of ice resin when I'm making jewelry. I haven't made jewelry in probably a year or more, but when I do make it, I make a lot of it. I have made hundreds, literally hundreds of pieces of jewelry using ice resin. So me and ice resin, we got our thing going. We get along. I may not use it exactly the way the company recommends that you use it, and I would recommend that you follow their instructions, not mine. And I will put their link down in the description so that you can go to their website and make sure that you do it right. But one thing you need to know, ice resin has a shelf life of about a year. And like I said, it's been over a year since I've made jewelry, so mine has gone to the dark side. And here's what happens when it goes to the dark side. The resin part, my resin has stayed really good. This is the color it's supposed to be. It's just kind of clear in the bottle like this, and you know, it's not bad. My hardener has gone to the dark side. You can see that it's very yellow. This is not the color that it is when you get it. When you get it, it's sort of a cloudy clear, kind of like this, only a little bit cloudy. That's the color it should be, not this. If your hardener looks like this, it's gone bad. You need to throw it out and get another one. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to order another one. I'm not going to do it right now, though, because I'm not making jewelry. And so it's just going to go bad before I get around to using it. That's the caveat with ice resin. I really try to only order enough that, you know, kind of estimate how much I'm going to be using. I don't want to have a whole lot left over. And for some reason, I just quit making jewelry with all this resin left over, and it turned on me. So anyway, and they come in different sizes. You can order a smaller container of it or bigger ones, you know. So if you're going to try this, get just a little one to start with if you're not sure about it. And you don't have to use the ice resin brand. There's all different resins. There's that Envirotex. There's all kinds of two-part resins out there that you can get. I use ice resin mainly because the one thing that I really like about it that you don't get with all other brands is that you have a larger window of time to work with it before it starts to harden. Depending on your climate, when I mix this up, I usually have at least a good 30 minutes where I can work with it before it starts to get sticky. And you know, and that, especially for making something like beads, you kind of need that time to do your thing. And some resins, as soon as you start mixing them up, you know, you have to pour them or use them immediately because they start to set up. Ice resin, not so much. As far as setting up goes, it is slow. Usually I try to leave mine overnight. I coat them and then I don't touch them. I'll try to leave them at least overnight. And by the next day, they're hardened to the touch. They have to cure for 3 days. And I do this with my jewelry that I make. Anytime I use ice resin, I try to leave it alone for 3 days. And that ensures that it's completely cured and completely hard. And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds just way too complicated and advanced for me, okay, seriously, I'm using it. I promise you, it's not complicated and advanced. The whole, you know, mixing the two things together might seem intimidating, especially if you're a new crafter person, but it's not, really. Just, you know, try it. If this is something you want to try it. If you don't want to use ice resin, you can go down to your craft store and just look over. It's usually where the glue or the paint is, and they will have some type of two-part resin that you can use to play with. The other thing I like about ice resin is that when you mix up a batch and you have some left over, you can pour it onto paper. And it does different things depending on the paper. If you use like a dictionary page, a really thin paper, mulberry tissue papers, it makes it sort of transparent. It does some actually really kind of cool things with paper. When you're using resin, it sticks to everything. You'll want to have, ideally, something plastic over your work area. You can use like a big trash bag or some plastic wrap or something like that is just about the only thing that resin won't stick to. I also found that Vaseline makes a good resist. And sometimes I'll just use a piece of freezer paper and just rub some Vaseline over it, and that works just fine if I'm worried about something sticking. So there's that. But since we have our little toothpicks and our drying rack, sticking won't be a problem for that part of it. Okay, here's where the ice resin people are going to cringe. I'm going to mix it up wrong. They tell you to, and then they give you, when you buy the resin, it'll come in a little kit, and they'll give you a little measuring cup, and I think they give you a popsicle stick to stir with, and you know, they tell you to pour one into the other, and it matters which one, and I can't remember that because I don't pay attention to that. And they tell you not to mix up less than an ounce. Okay, I don't pay attention to that either. And I don't really measure either. I just eyeball it. And the reason that I don't, because I did it first. I measured very carefully. I used the 2 cups. I measured carefully. I used the popsicle stick. After doing hundreds of pieces of jewelry with this stuff, you know, you can eyeball it. It's like cooking, and you don't need to measure anymore. You just know that it's about right. But you do have to mix equal parts, exact equal parts. That is important. If you have too much resin and not enough hardener, whatever you cover is going to be sticky forever. It will not set up. If you use too much hardener and not enough resin, even if your hardener has not turned bad like mine has, if you use too much good hardener with your resin, it can yellow. So it's a fine line. And but most of the things I do, especially for these paper deals, that fine line doesn't really matter. I mean, I definitely want to have enough hardener because I want it to harden, but if it yellows, I don't care. That's why I'm going to use this, go ahead and try to use this up, because a lot of these already have some yellow in them. And it'll just give them kind of a vintage look. So I don't really care about the yellowing for this application, but for most others I would. I buy these little medicine cups. Gosh, I'm doing a lot of talking. Has everyone just scattered and left because I'm boring you half to death? I wouldn't blame you. There's like no action going on here. Okay, but there's a lot of information, so maybe that'll make up for it, I hope. I buy these little medicine cups from American Science and Surplus. They will have them. They have the little measurements on there, and they usually have them because there's some kind of misprint or something, you know, because that's the kind of things they get. But you can get a big long sleeve of them for practically next to nothing. So I buy these there so that I've got plenty on hand to mix my resins. I also buy paint brushes either there or from, you know, Walmart, wherever I can find those big packages of like 100 really cheap, awful paint brushes for a couple of dollars. And these are the kind that I use for the resin because you get one use out of them. You use them and then that's the end of them. You can, I have found, if before the resin hardens on your brush, if you go and squirt some Simple Green on it and clean it off real good, I can get maybe 3 or 4 more uses out of it before it just hardens completely, but it's still not the same. You know, it's hard to clean that resin off completely. And the Ice Resin website might have some tips for that. I'm sure there's probably some solvents and stuff that you can use. But I just buy these cheap paint brushes. I consider them disposable. I use them for one, you know, application, one session, and then I toss them because they're cheap. So that's what I've got. And for the beads, you're going to need some Vaseline. Well, you're not really going to need it, but I use the Vaseline to put on the toothpick in case the resin runs off of the bead and onto the toothpick. if you don't have it covered in Vaseline, your bead will be forever bonded to that toothpick. So when you're doing this, you do want to make sure that you use just enough resin to cover the bead, but not so much that it's going to run, because that's going to cause you problems. Okay, I'm going to need my little thing here. These are the beads that I pulled out to use to try this on. I did a few the other day, and it worked out fine. And because I can never remember which one I'm supposed to pour first, I just use the resin first because it's part A, and A comes before B. So that's what I do. And I need it to be equal parts. My little cup here has lines for 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons, 4 tablespoons. So I'm going to put this to the, I'm actually going to use, let's do the 1 tablespoon line. And the resin, ice resin people tell you not to mix less than an ounce at a time, which would be a ½ ounce of each part. But sometimes I don't need that much, so I don't mix that much. Okay, that's about right. So this is the do as I say, not as I do part. You would want to measure the hardener into another cup and then pour them together. I don't do that. I just, am I in the frame? Yeah. I just pour it on until it gets to the 2 tablespoon line. And do it slowly because it's going to kind of, settle and do weird things. And I got to hold it up to the light to see if I'm on that line, because, oh, those are teaspoons, not tablespoons. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't matter what the measurement is as long as they're equal. Okay, I think that's about right. And a pinch to grow on. There we go. And then I further ignore the instructions and I just use the end of my paintbrush to stir it. And you want to stir this really good. It has to be really, really mixed good. And if your hardener is good, this is not going to be a yellow tinge like it is now. It's just going to look kind of clear, cloudy. And it's going to have tons of bubbles in it, and that's okay. Just ignore that and keep mixing. And I have to tell you, I'm actually allergic to ice resin. Not severely, just slightly. I should probably be wearing gloves and a mask, but I'm not, because it's really not that bad. This doesn't give off a strong odor. It doesn't have a strong solvent smell. It does have a smell, but you really have to get kind of close to it to smell it. I don't think it's the odor that gets me. I really think it's just the chemical fumes, even though they don't have an odor. I think that's what it is, because it's not that I get a rash where it touches me. I usually get a rash around my nose and on my upper lip. And that's usually from, when that happens, it's usually because you've breathed something that you're allergic to. So that's what it is. And then on the jewelry, if I wear resin-covered jewelry, like a necklace, I get a rash around my neck. So yeah, I use and even sell jewelry made with a product that I can't wear because I'm allergic to it. And I use it anyway because, like I said, it's very mild and it might not actually be an allergy, but more of a sensitivity. I don't know. But ice resin is like the lesser of all the evils in the resin world for me, anyway. Now, ideally, if you're freaked out about the bubbles, you would want to leave this alone for maybe 5 minutes, and the bubbles will kind of start to dissipate. If they don't, if you have like a lamp with a strong bulb in it, you can just set it under the lamp, and the heat will kind of help to debubble it. Don't ever hit it with your heat gun. Don't stick it in your oven. You know, I'm always sticking things in my oven. Don't do any of that to try to speed up the drying process or to try to get rid of the bubbles. Just let it do naturally and it'll do fine. The bubbles are really not going to show in most of these beads because most of these beads are from my painted drop papers, just my scrap papers, you know, that line my work area. And they just turned out so fabulously. So I'm not worried about bubbles. I'm not worried about yellowing. You do, however, want to make sure that you have sealed your beads before you resin them. All of these have already been sealed with either nail polish or that varnish stuff. And the reason you want to do that is because the ice resin, the paper's porous, the ice resin will soak into the paper and it will sort of discolor it and make parts of it opaque, transparent, and it's just going to do all kinds of weirdness. Okay, where's my picks? Here's my picks. So I'm going to stick my toothpick down in this is my designated craft Vaseline, so I don't know what that blob of something is, but I'm not going to worry about it. Stick my toothpick down in there, just enough to coat it lightly, and then put my bead on it. Wipe off any excess because the Vaseline does kind of resist the resin. Then you're just going to paint it on, and like I said, an even thin layer, because you don't want this running all over the place. And it doesn't really matter how you brush it on, just get it on there. As long as it's even. It does tend to kind of level itself out. What is that? Oh, self-leveling, I guess is what you would call that. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that, but I've got it on there. And what I usually do is take a second toothpick, dip it in the Vaseline, wipe off the excess, and then transfer it just to make sure that I haven't sealed it to there. And there we go. Now, in about 30 minutes, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that whole transfer thing again, like that. And I may do that a couple of times, and that is because the resin is we got gravity going on, so it's gonna run somewhat. Hopefully I didn't put it on thick enough to where it's gonna drip down the stick, but it is gonna try to run, and it may start to set up before it hits the stick, and then I'm gonna have like a pool of resin right here, and I don't want that. I want it to dry evenly, so that's why just 2 or 3 times I will turn it. You can dry it like this if you have some way to dry them like this, that's fine, but you're still going to have to turn that bead on occasion because the resin is going to want to pool. And that's why you want it just thick enough to coat your bead, but not so much that it's going to run all over the place. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, my camera turns itself off for no reason. I'm wondering if it has some kind of setting to where, like, if I don't mess with it every, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, it shuts itself off because it thinks that it's been forgotten. I don't know. I don't know what that is. Okay, let's resin up a couple more of these so you can get the idea. Vaseline bead. Okay, this bead is bigger than my stick, so I just have to be careful that when I set it up that it doesn't fall down and hit my thing here, because the resin will make it stick to the thing. So here we go. And you want to just be very careful. Another reason why I do that, toothpick to toothpick thing is to make sure that I don't seal up my bead holes, because that would totally defeat the purpose of making these beads, don't you think? So I'm going to transfer that, and I don't want it too thick because it'll resist the resin. Put it here, and then I'm going to finish this off by going around this end, making sure not to get it in the hole. Okay. So you get the idea, right? I will finish out these beads, And let me do that off camera, get these coated good, and then I'll show you what I do with my leftover resin. So I'll be back.